Hello and welcome to Miniatures Rundown. I'm Joshua and today I'm joined by Chad.
Hello.
Chad, can you introduce yourself? What do you do?
My name's Chad Hoverter, and I am a digital sculptor.
So most recently, or not most recently, but perhaps most recently in a big way, you've done the minis for Frosthaven?
I've done some of
the minis for Frosthaven?
A very big project with a lot of people involved. I've got several in there in that box, and I'm very proud of that work. It's very fun. It's a lot of fun to work with.
What other projects have you worked on that we might know about?
I've been working in the industry, the board game industry, for since about 2009. So I started in hand sculpting. So way back then, I started working with Plaid Hat Games. So one of their famous games called Mice and Mystics was one of my first projects. And I've done most of their other stuff since then, even when I switched to digital around 2014, which was kind of driven by the market. Everybody wanted digital work. So I've done lots of things for Plaid Hat. I've done Stuffed Fables, Familiar Tales, Quirky Circuits, all of their regular ones. I've also worked for Gamelin Games, their latest one, The Last Kingdom, from the TV show on Netflix.
Okay.
So those were fun to do because they had to do kind of likenesses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
From did you sculpt from references for that?
I sculpted from clips from the TV show itself. So that was a lot of fun. And also they have one with a Tiny Epic Dungeon. Their thing is Tiny Epics.
Yes.
I don't know if you're familiar.
Yeah, we have a lot of that at the game store we work at.
Yeah. So I had to make a bunch of little, dungeon miniatures about yay big. So that was a lot of fun too. So other people, I've worked for Restoration, Fireball Island, and I did a little bit of work on Thunder Road, but not the finishing work. So that was done by another very good sculptor. But yeah, so I've been all over. I've got miniatures in lots of different boxes. Yeah, exactly.
I've sculpted lots of minis, man.
Something like that.
All right, so yeah. Just a couple of questions from what you just told me.
Yeah, sure.
First one, when you first said Plaid Hat Games, Mice and Mystics,
yes.
Stuffed Fables, I would have said that you're Milieu, I forget how to pronounce that.
Milieu?
Oeuvre, I don't know. Would have been cutesy, but because those are kind of like adorable minis.
Right.
Mice and Mystics definitely has an edge to it.
Yes.
But certainly a far cry from Tiny Epic and definitely from Frosthaven.
Yes.
Which is very much not that kind of thing.
Correct. A lot more serious. Let's say serious.
Is it a shock to go from one to the other? Does it really change your sculpting process at all?
I would say no. And in some respects, I think the cutesy stuff is harder. Right? Because you have to pay more attention to scale and proportion because it's all wonky to start. So it's you have to be more careful, I guess. I don't know how, maybe that doesn't come across. It's hard to explain. But when you have an artwork piece for a human and general human proportions, it's a little easier to handle. But now you've got a skeleton that's cartoon giant head, little body, and
that little mouse does not work in real life, right?
Right.
The physicality doesn't quite pan out. So
right.
Okay. So. Now you mentioned you've been sculpting since 2009.
Yes.
And you made the swap to digital.
Yes.
In 2014.
Yes, sir.
Now is that largely just due to being able to more? Is it a speed thing? Is it a workflow thing that companies are asking for when they're asking more for digital or is it literally just a style thing?
It's probably none of those things. I think it's mostly a process thing because when you work in physical miniatures and I make you a physical copy of the miniature you want, now you, for the most part, have to take that physical miniature and send it physically to China to have plastics made if you're going plastics in your box because that's where most of the plastics are made. And people don't really want to do that because you get a box worth of $10,000 worth of miniatures.
And it falls off a cargo ship.
And it falls off a cargo ship, you're in trouble.
Now a fish has $10,000 worth of miniatures and he's not using it.
And he doesn't know how to play board games. Right? So in general, the board game industry, almost as a whole, I'm sure there are people who take physical sculpt still, but they just want digital because it's easier to work with. It's quite a bit more prolific now as well. So that's pretty much the driving force. And I switched because I had to, because most of the clients that I wanted to work with wanted digital files. So I did that.
Is there any significant challenges in moving from physical sculpting to digital sculpting?
Yeah. The learning curve on the software is insane. I personally use a program called ZBrush, and it takes time. My first digital job was Fireball Island, and I kind of didn't know what I was doing, and I kind of stumbled my way through it and managed to give them what they wanted, which was very happy for me because it was a super popular, and it kind of elevated my name in the industry. So I got a lot of work out of that. So
if it makes you feel better, the one I do know a guy who was super pumped for Fireball Island, and he seemed to really like the restoration.
Oh,
so,
very good, very good. Yeah, Restoration's a fabulous company. They just did that Thunder Road redo, which is insanely fun. Go check it out. I'm not paid by by Restoration.
So two things.
Yeah.
Coming off of that. Number one, you kind of answered this, but when you're doing something that is following, like, for those who don't know, Fireball Island was a game from the 80s.
Yeah.
Like it's a game where you kind of launch an actual little volcano.
Yeah, you roll a ball out of the volcano's mouth, and it runs down these pathways and does stuff.
And Restoration Games, which does this for a few games, did a kind of a... You see this a lot in the video game industry right now, right? Where it's like, remastered, redone.
Diablo?
Diablo. Well, we're talking about good ones.
Burn.
So is there a pressure to go, okay, I'm working on this game that, like, people have a fondness and maybe a cult following for? Does that kind of, like, is that in the back of your mind when you're sculpting, or is it kind of just like, I got to make a volcano? It's got to roll.
Yeah, in that particular case, because of the fact that I was kind of stumbling my way through, I really wasn't having that worry. I just wanted to make good minis for
Bigger problems at the time?
Yes, I had bigger problems at the time. And plus, I never played the game when I was a kid.
Okay.
So I wasn't into cool stuff like that, or nerdy stuff, whatever you want to call it. I wasn't into that kind of stuff when I was younger. So I didn't really understand what kind of following there could be behind it. So yeah.
But so the second part, because you kind of joked, I'm not being paid by Restoration Games right now. So you've worked for a couple companies, Plaid Hat, Restoration, you mentioned one other one.
Gamelin.
Are you kind of a mercenary sculptor for hire, or are you contracted for like a certain amount of time for each company?
Yeah. It's by project. So if they want to, like, for instance, Frosthaven, not Frostgrave. Frosthaven was a collaboration between tons of different freelancers. I mean, there's so many miniatures in that box.
With how heavy that box is, no one man can lift it, and no one man can make it.
It could make it, right. So yeah, in that case, it was a huge thing. Most of the time in Plaid Hat hires me to do something, I do all of the work. Same with most of other smaller games, 8-10 miniatures or whatever. And I did have an old one. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea.
I know the name.
Yeah, from Gamelin.
It's been a while.
Really big box games. They're known for their tiny epic, but this was a huge box, and it had like 100 sculpts, and I did all of them. But that was back when I was actually doing them by hand, not digital. So that was
my God.
Then. I know. It was pretty crazy.
Do you ever get the masters back? Do you ever keep a copy of the masters?
No, because they're often destroyed in production for physical ones. Yeah.
How do you make a portfolio of your minis? Do you get final products, photos from the designer, and they send it to you, and so you can say, "Hey, here's my work"?
Sometimes I'll actually get a copy of the game as part of my compensation, and I'll use those miniatures for self-promotion. But most of the time, it's just pictures of the miniatures themselves.
Okay.
Yeah. But now that I'm mostly digital, that's usually just a picture on my phone, because that's all. I mean, I do take pictures of because I print them as well.
Okay.
For myself, just to make sure they're okay and they work the way they're supposed to. So I'll take a picture of. I'll have a picture of the digital sculpt, which people like to see, a render or whatever, and then I'll also have a picture of the print, so you know that the thing printed well. So yeah, that's how I do that.
Let's do a couple positives before I get into the bummer one.
Sure.
Do you have a favorite mini you've ever sculpted that you can think of?
I
know that's a hard one.
Is.
Given how many you've sculpted, I think that's a hard call.
That's super hard. Well, we haven't really talked about what I my current projects.
I'm going to end with that one.
Okay.
With the, what are you working
So
on
there's
now?
some of the,
So we
some
can
of the
put a
stuff
little-
in there that I think is some of my favorite. So
Okay.
I do. We'll talk about it, but I do some proxy work. So some of my proxies I think are some of my favorite stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
I apologize for hitting the mic with my hat. That was the dumbest thing I've ever done on a video.
Donk.
Yeah. All right. So now let's get into the one.
Yeah,
which
sure.
is, we joked about AI.
Yeah.
It's a thing that's affecting all of us.
Yes.
Currently, I am not aware of AI being used to make miniatures.
It's happening.
Is it happening already, or is this? I mean, clearly there's going to be a company who's going to want to do that because it'll save them money.
It's happening. It's early in its infancy, but there are Chat GPT text to miniature capabilities already.
Scan a bunch of minis, put it into a library.
Yeah.
Steal it. Like
I haven't seen one. I assume they're fairly simple, but that's for now.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, I guess in that kind of world, do you have a backup plan? I'm not sure I have a backup plan.
I don't have a backup plan. No. My current reliance on is that you are unable to copyright that sort of thing. That's my current reliance. So, and that it's super simple. Like you're not going to get. I don't think you're going to get an AI to sculpt, Games Workshop pieces yet.
An AI can't make a Space Marine. Although there's enough of them that you might be able to feed it in there.
Right. Now, artwork wise, just concept artwork wise, it'll do fine. But even still, it's still all in its infancy. We don't know where it's going to go. I don't like where it's headed. No, most people don't.
Most people who make things don't anyway.
Right. Exactly. Or write things or
creatives.
Yeah. And there's also the scarier uses, deep fakes and voice modulation and all that stuff. That's really mind-boggling and terrifying.
Well, let's do a mood swing right back to positive.
There we go.
What are you working on now?
I've spent a lot of time doing the freelance, and I enjoy it, and I still will do it. But my focus right now is on subscription service through Patreon, and to some degree My Miniature Factory, because I think it has a higher cap. Maybe not on the front end, but as long as you keep growing, you're going to make more money doing that than in freelance, because there's only a certain amount that you can charge to freelance customer. Whereas as long as my Patreon keeps growing, I keep making more money.
People,
you just need more people,
not more person. Right.
Not more jobs. Exactly.
So do you have a Patreon?
Yes, I do. I have a Patreon.
What is
it? DMG Miniatures.
Okay.
I'm sorry. DMG, just minis, not miniatures. I screwed up my own.
DMG minis, kind of like damaged minis?
Yes.
Okay.
DMG minis, and that's on Patreon. That's also on the popular STL sales sites like Colts 3D,
My Mini Factory.
My Miniature Factory, or My Mini Factory. I keep doing that. So yeah, I'm DMG Minis on Facebook. I'm DMG Minis on Instagram. I'm DMG Minis everywhere.
Do you have a specific focus for your sculpting work? Your solo sculpting work?
Right now, I'm doing proxies for everyone's favorite tabletop sci-fi battle war game.
Star Wars Legion?
Nope.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I should have said War Machine. That would have really been the joke.
We'll just call them They Who Shall Not Be Named. Whatever.
Wayne's Workshop.
Yeah,
but
those guys.
Yeah.
And I feel like I make enough effort to not step on IP toes. Sometimes they don't agree, but I don't know how to fix that. So, but I'm still able to do what I do. So I don't know.
Now, you mentioned that you have both Patreon and then the other services.
Yes.
My Mini Factory is probably the big one, so I'll ask about them.
Yeah.
Do you use the My Mini Factory Tribes feature at all?
I am trying to dip my toes into it.
Okay.
And I don't want to knock them, but I've been having trouble.
Okay.
So I'm just barely in it. I'm not super a huge fan of the platform. Just the inner workings of it. I've had some issues. It could be me. I'll grant it could be me, but I'm struggling through it. I'm going to keep at it because just to have another avenue for people to get to my work, it benefits me. So I'll keep at it till I iron out all the issues. But right now I'm stable and scooting forward on Patreon pretty heavy. I've been there for about 2.5 years.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Because admittedly, I collect a fair number of STLs, which is I definitely have.
Very cool.
I definitely have a digital hard drive
Addiction?
of opportunity.
Okay.
We'll call it that. We'll call it the hard drive of opportunity.
Okay.
There's a couple Patreons I've subscribed to on and off. I'll
really?
check the week.
Okay.
But generally, what I often do is I usually buy a la carte on one of the sites.
Gotcha.
Just because it feels like less of a commitment.
Yes.
And I don't know if that's something you also feel like kind of that you need to address as a creator, which is like, because, if you've got a Patreon, it's like, let's say 1 month you've got, Devastation Marines or something like that. And next month you've got a elephant. You got to get each month. Whereas if you just put them onto My Mini Factory, does that kind of change the economics of what you charge on Patreon having that? Or is it just kind of you know what you want, you know what you're worth?
Yeah, I don't worry about that too much because, I can't collect everyone, even if they know they're paying, even if they know about me, and even if they know they're paying more for the product on a sales site than they would be if they were on my Patreon. Some people just don't want to make that commitment, and so I just kind of set it at a price I have to make sure it's a higher price than the people who are getting it on my Patreon, because otherwise why would they be in my Patreon? Right. So if they could get it for the same price. So it's a little bit higher usually. And for the most part, I just feel that's the best way. I struggle with it sometimes, like, is this too much? Is this too little? But
it's hard to price a digital item, right?
Yeah, especially when you have someone like my Miniature Factory they have these $1 tiers.
Right.
So it's driving the price per miniature down in the tribes market, and the last I heard, it was down to around 75 cents a model.
Oof.
Or less.
Wow.
Yeah, just depending on who you subscribe to on tribes, which makes it tough for the little guy on there, and there's a lot of concern about that. But they're carrying forward with that program, and I'm sure it's doing well for them. But some of the littler people get pushed down the list a little bit
because you're one sculptor and one person, and some of the larger ones,
they've got crews.
You've got 10 sculptors or something like that. I don't know how many sculptors something like One Page Rules has, but I know it's not just one person.
One Page Rules, yeah,
they're big.
Yeah.
So two final questions.
Yeah, sure.
Number one.
Yeah.
As an STL maker,
yes, sir.
Do you struggle with STL piracy? Is that something that do you ever go out onto like Etsy and see people like, hey, wait a minute, I didn't give you a license for that?
Yeah.
Is that something that shows up on your radar, or is it just kind of negligible so far?
It's showed up on my radar exactly once.
Okay.
I saw someone sent me a picture from Etsy, and I contacted the guy and said, please remove this, and he did. I think I'm probably right now at this time, could change in the future, a little too small to worry about that so much, right? Exactly. And even still, even if I didn't, I just there's nothing you can really do about it. I mean, you can, if they're on a platform, you can ask them to take it down. If they don't take it down, you can complain to the platform. And if you're dead-ended there, there's really nothing else.
Yeah.
Unless you're willing to go like full hog into litigation, which, right.
We look back into cost again.
Right. We're back into Wame's Gerp shop there. Sometimes.
That's spelled WAMESGUR, by the way, just, trademark.
Right.
No, kidding. And then final question.
Yeah.
If, as someone who's been sculpting both physically and digitally for a while, this is a very cliche question, but I'm going to ask it.
Okay.
Where do you start sculpting minis? If you're somebody who's interested in sculpting your own minis.
Oh, okay.
Not from a trying to get into the business of it.
Yes.
Because I always think that's start with loving it, not with trying to make money off of it, with any art.
Sure.
But from an art perspective, let's say that I wanted to sculpt a mini of our little heroes here.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
If I want to do that, where would I start? Like, what's the process for starting?
Interesting. Okay. Well, it would depend on a couple of things. If you're willing to invest a lot of learning curve time, you could start with something like Blender, which is free, so that's benefit. But you could, but it's difficult to learn how to use the tools properly to do something complicated like that. So that's one way to start if you were looking for digital work. If you were just doing stuff for yourself and want to do it by hand, I think that's probably an easier entry point to making your own things is by hand with clay. So
good old green stuff in a model.
Yeah. I preferred epoxy when I was doing it, so because it dried on its own after a certain amount of time. So you had a certain amount of work time, and then it would harden on its own. And then sometimes polymer clay, which you would have to fire. Or heat, just put it in the toaster oven, actually. Yeah.
I do have a toaster oven.
Yeah. But that also takes some skill, but it's also, I think it's probably easier to learn to do that So if you're not looking to like do it for money, I don't think you really need to do digital unless you just want to.
Really?
Because I think it's harder. The learning curve's harder. The tools, it's not harder to learn how to shape things in the shape that you want, but the tools themselves are sometimes so complicated they're not intuitive. So you open up Blender and there's just a bajillion tools.
UI overload.
It's the same with ZBrush. It's the same with almost any 3D sculpting program. It's just a lot. And you can struggle your way through it and learn how to do stuff. I don't think it's that bad. But I think it's probably easier just to shape stuff with a tool.
Okay.
I don't know. That's my opinion.
Not what I was expecting. That's interesting.
Yeah.
I've done a very little of green stuff sculpting.
Right.
Because we love kit bashing so much, and sometimes you just have to
Yes.
sculpt something that you can't find a part for.
Yeah.
I won't say I'm good at it.
Yeah.
I won't say I'm even good at making sure that I don't end up with fingerprints and
Right.
stuff by the end
Of course.
But
Fingerprints.
I
remember those days.
You just want to burn your fingerprints off.
I don't miss it. I don't miss it at all.
All right. Well, any final thoughts, closing things you want to end with?
No, I don't think so. I really enjoy working in the industry and working. I love making my sci-fi stuff. It's on Patreon and those places. It's working out really well. And yeah, I don't know what else to say.
Thanks for talking to me. Check
you,
out
Josh.
DMG Minis.
Yes, DMG Minis,
Not DMG Miniatures. Honestly, you
DMG Minis everywhere.
just buy the website and have it redirect. Then it won't matter.
Yeah, I should probably look into that.
All right. Well, thanks so much for talking to me.
Yeah, thank you.
Hope you enjoy the rest of the con.
I appreciate
Everybody else, see you out there.
it. Bye.